How we doing, everybody? Listen, if you ask a random member of the public to name all the different martial arts styles that they can think of, you'll probably hear the same things. Things like karate, kung fu, judo. But if you ask the average UFC fan to talk about fighting styles which were effective in real life combat, you'd hear some different things. You'd hear Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, boxing, Thai boxing, things of that nature. But the reality is, throughout the earth, there is 200 different styles of martial arts, with many, many others that were simply forgotten throughout history. Now, some of these martial arts styles are more civilized or sportier versions of older martial arts. For example, judo, that was created in the late 1800s as a sport version of Japanese jiu-jitsu. And there's other martial arts that came and just put a spin on an existing martial art. I'm talking about Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That took the ground fighting element of Japanese jiu-jitsu, which is a little bit basic, and then the Gracies improved it drastically beyond recognition. And of course, as I say, we now call that BJJ. But of course, there is dozens of other ones that cashed in on pop culture crazes like ninjutsu and the many different styles of Jeet Kune Do, which wouldn't be effective in a real life situation, let's be honest. But there are some martial arts which are still in existence to this day, which were created out of necessity. And these were created in times when there was no law enforcement whatsoever, when you had to defend your reputation as somebody who was not to be messed with because your life may depend on it. And some of them are every bit as brutal and dangerous today as they were when people relied on these skills to literally fight to the death. And today I'm going to take you through 5 insane martial arts which really do exist. Number 5, Batarech, Irish stick fighting. Now, if I said think of an Irish martial artist who's a master of handheld weaponry, then your mind's eye would immediately conjure up images of this incident. But Conor McGregor wasn't the first Celtic warrior to recognise the offensive capabilities of tubular weaponry. Irish stick fighting, Batarech, is a stick fighting martial art unique to the Emerald Isle that dates back hundreds of years, and some historians say it was invented by rural people that couldn't afford a sword. And the peak of Batarech came about 300 years ago, early in the 19th century. At this time, almost every man in Ireland would carry a shillelagh with them. What is a shillelagh, I hear you ask, Bisping? Well, it's a 4-foot long wooden cane with a club head at one end and often a spike at the other end. Young men would practice endlessly. Several styles, as different as kickboxing is to Thai boxing, were also developed, and it became half sport, half gang fight. A champion would dare challengers to face him at a fair, a festival, or outside a pub. He would lie his coat on the ground, and anyone who would dare to fight him would step onto the coat, and as soon as foot touched cloth, it was on. Bring it on, come on. Bring it on, come on. Now, as you can imagine, these fights were brutal and sometimes deadly. There are records also of gangs of stick fighters, 300 people on each side fighting on and off for hours. Now, some of these stick fighters used to get creative. They would hollow out the inside of their shillelaghs and pour inside it molten lead. And of course, when that cooled down, it made it a heavier and especially deadly weapon. Now, listen, if you ask me, that sounds like a lot of work to maintain the look of a wooden stick, because it's not like the Athletic Commission were coming around and testing these people. There was no USADA for shillelaghs or Irish stick fighting or Batarech, okay? Why not just use an iron fucking bar? But still, the tradition of Batarech, if not clubbing people's skulls open, lives on still today in Ireland, and you can take Batarech lessons all over the Emerald Isle. Number 4, Can. French walking stick fighting. Listen, the French, they've had a very unfair reputation throughout history as being, well, not particularly tough. And as I say, that isn't warranted, because some of the French martial arts are insane. For example, French kickboxing, known as savate, that is a legitimate form of combat. The oblique kick, used by John Jones, that comes from savate. And today's savate is a much more watered down version of what it was for centuries. Savate comes from the French word for old boot, and it was invented by French sailors and labourers who wore steel toe-capped boots because, well, that's just better for kicking somebody in the head with. Can was Savate's sister martial art, using the same kicks but swapping out punches for strikes with walking sticks. And by the 18th century, there were tons of schools all over the big cities of France like Paris, teaching gentlemen how to use their ivory or metal-tipped walking sticks as weapons if they were to be confronted by a mugger. But as the world got a little bit more civilized, can fell out of fashion and only a handful of people kept the techniques alive. But it was revived in the 1970s as can de combat, a sportified version of the martial art. But I know what you're thinking, Bisping, hold on a minute. Mixed martial arts took over 25 years to be legalized in France. How come it's cool walking around whacking people with walking sticks? Well, unfortunately, the answer is, can de combat's rules? They take all the fun out of it. Fighters, they wear more padding than a lunatic asylum. Of course, they got to wear helmets complete with fencing masks, and worse, overhand strikes and thrusts, well, they're just illegal. Listen, I'd have loved to have seen the original form of can, but sadly, this new version, can de combat, yeah, it's boring. Alright, I'm here to tell you about the Raycon Everyday Earbuds. These things are absolutely fantastic, let me tell you. First of all, they look good. They look fantastic. They feel fantastic, but more importantly, because they're headphones, they sound absolutely fantastic. And with the customized gel tips, right, you can fit them in any ear you want. Listen, look at my ears. They're a mess. That is years in the octagon, so my ears are all messed up. Generally, I can't wear earbuds, and that is an absolute fact. They just won't go in. These things go in, but more importantly, they stay in. I went for a run this morning, didn't come out. I can shake my head violently like a madman. They don't come out. I can punch, I can kick, I can do whatever. I can bob and weave. These things are going absolutely nowhere, all while listening to my favorite music. Now, another advantage is that they have 8 hours of playtime or a 32-hour battery life. Another great feature is that obviously these things are priced just right. You get all the excellent audio quality that you're looking for without breaking the bank. In fact, they're coming in about half the price of the premium audio earbuds. So look, it's no wonder that these little bad boys, the Raycon Everyday Audio Earbuds, they have over 48,000 5-star reviews. So I suggest you check them out, because honestly, you will not be disappointed. So, if you want to give these things a try, by the way, it comes in this lovely little charging case as well. If you want to give these things a try, and I suggest you do, honestly, it sounds like a hard sell. I can't use earbuds. These things go in fine, they feel great, they sound great, which is important, we're all looking for that, and it's really good value for money. If you go to buyraycon.com/Bisping, you're going to get 15% off, or you can just click the link in the episode description down below. Number 3, Rough and Tumble. Now listen, there has never been a more innocent sounding name for such a brutal pastime. I mean, a bit of rough and tumble. That sounds like I'm explaining to Rebecca how Lucas and I have smashed one of her favourite plant pots, or perhaps something that certain fighters might pay something a bit extra for at a strip club. But the reality is, do not let the tame sounding name fool you. Rough and tumble is one of the most vicious forms of grappling that the world has ever seen. The term gouging was popularized by Rough and Tumble. In fact, a gouging match was literally how these things were promoted. Rough and Tumble began in what is now the southern United States 300 years ago. Basically, dueling for people that couldn't afford swords or pistols. A time and location would be set, and sometimes entire towns or mining camps would show up to enjoy the fights. One time, Irish writer Thomas Ashe wrote down a report of a typical rough and tumble match which he witnessed in America in the 1800s, and what he saw haunted him for the rest of his days. One man from Kentucky and one guy from Virginia, they were arguing over who had the fastest horse. A challenge was made and a date and time were agreed to. Both men agreed to rough and tumble as opposed to a fair fight. Eventually word got out about the rough rules, and over 300 people showed up, some of them with bread, cheese, beers. Think of it like the earliest form of tailgating. Now, of course, the fight starts on the feet with a bit of punching, but as soon as the fight hits the ground, well, that is where the eye gouging and the biting begin. Now listen, if you think I've got it bad with one eye, wait till you hear about this. Even with one eye pulled all the way out, the Virginian man began to get the better of his opponent. How did he do that? Well, he pushed in both of the eyes of his opponents with his thumbs, and then he bit off his nose and then bit off his ears. And then, having lost 5 of his senses for the rest of his life, the man from Kentucky quit and the winner was declared. Now, listen, remember, this was an argument over who had the fastest horse. So, Call me stupid, but why didn't they just race the horses? Number 2, Dambay. One-handed African boxing. Now, lots of people are probably unaware that the basic form of modern Western boxing and mixed martial arts is taken from European swordsmanship, and particularly the style used in England for rapier and danger fights. They would turn the body sideways, one shoulder forward. This would present a smaller target. The left hand carried the rapier, a lighter, thinner blade for slicing, distancing and distracting. The right hand, the power hand, carried danger and a way more devastating blade. Well, have you ever wondered what would happen if boxing was based on an ancient fighting style using different weapons, say a spear and a shield? Well, wonder no more, because let me introduce you to the African combat sport of Dambay. In many parts of Africa, the apex weapons of old were a spear and a long, lightweight shield. This would protect you from your opponents, perhaps from an animal during a hunt, and it could also be used as a shade from the sun on a very, very hot day. Now, Dambay uses the same stance, defense, and attacks as those ancient warriors. They stand very far back and they utilize a lot of running and jumping attacks. The left hand, that's the shield, can only be used to block, parry and grab. The right hand and most of the arm wrapped in rope and gauze, and so much rope was used that the fist is basically entombed and the arm becomes almost like a long club. And they can also kick and sweep, and this sport is still massively popular to this day, even among children in Nigeria. You can take a look at it on YouTube if you just Google Dambay. Now, you win this fight by making any part of your opponent's body touch the floor, but more often than not, they touch the floor because they get knocked out. Now, with only right hand punches, they do wait for a while and they wait for the perfect shot, but when they do swing, they swing with everything that they have, which can often lead to them being off balance. But of course, if they connect, then it is lights out, baby. You're going to sleep. Basically, it's like watching any Dan Henderson fight you've ever seen. Apart from these guys, they probably speak better English.
That's a low blow.
Number 1, Lethway or Burmese boxing. Now, before I get started, let me just tell you, Lethway, I love it. It's absolutely batshit crazy. It's an 800-year-old sport which still exists more or less in its traditional form today. They don't wear gloves on their hands. That's because they tie their knuckles or cover them in hemp rope, and they add in a few headbutts just for good measure. Lethway is the national sport of Myanmar, the Southwest Asian country that used to be called Burma. Ancient rivals of neighboring Thailand, who obviously invented Muay Thai. Thai boxing is known as the art of the 8 limbs. Well, Burma, they wanted to outdo them, so they called Lethway the art of the 9 limbs, with the 9th, of course, being the good old-fashioned headbutt. For 8 centuries now, Lethway has been popular as both military training and as a sporting attraction. Matches were big deals at villages during religious festivals, market days, and even funerals of important people. And you thought it was only your drunk uncle that headbutted people at a funeral. Now listen, Lethway is not just Thai boxing with headbutts thrown in. The clinching is very different because, of course, there is potential for headbutt counters. In the pocket, fighters use headbutts, but they do that to create space for elbow strikes. There's also a massive 2-minute rest period which sees each guy fully rested and almost back to 100% cardio ability after that rest. So the result in that is that they are less likely to pace themselves, which makes the fight just insane. You will see a lot of spinning stuff, people trying for knockouts, and of course with all the headbutts, they don't care if they fall on the face. Now, Thai boxing was modernized 80 years ago. The King of Thailand saw potential in westernizing their national sport. They added in boxing gloves, a boxing ring, standard rules and judges. But Burma did not do that with Lethway. No, today the hands are still wrapped in unrefined hemp rope, just like they were centuries ago. And the fighters even tie little tiny knots in the rope in the hope that they could cut opponents' eyes with them. However, one concession to safety is that they no longer dip their hands in tar and then into crushed seashells. Now, this idea, you've probably seen it in the Van Damme movie Kickboxer, where they dipped in broken glass, okay? But seashells, let me tell you, are even worse, and some historical reports talk about faces completely being shorn off. And Lethway is still popular today in Myanmar and beginning to get a following internationally. Watching it is like taking a time machine back to martial arts were totally insane. So there it is. There's 5 insane martial arts. Let me know what you thought of the video down there in the comments. And if there's any martial arts styles that you think I missed, then of course I would love to hear from you. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe, ring the bell, enjoy the rest of your day.